And it's not working. Oh, it's working. Okay. So hi everyone and welcome to another live stream with myself and a special guest. This is Vanman Talks. Vanman, great to have you back once again. We'd spoken a number of times on the Sunday roast, but I think this is maybe the first or second time I've spoken to you directly. So it's great to have you back. You run a YouTube channel, or maybe it's best you introduce yourself before we jump into some of the topics of tonight.
Yeah, sure. I was just discussing all your nerdy stuff on the shelf before we
Yes.
started, the Gandalf staff and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I do a YouTube channel. It's great to be back. I love talking to you, Max. It's my first time on your channel, actually. Yeah, we have talked on Sunday Roast before. But yeah, I do. If anyone hasn't watched my channel, I do political commentary from my van from Brighton. And I've just started picking it up again. I had a little bit of a gap, but I've started making videos again. So I'm very much happy to be back and talking to you guys.
Fantastic. So some of the things I'd like to talk about tonight is, of course, so how do we approach, for example, right-wing politicians or right-wing commentators? I know we're not going to get too much into, a back and forth you had with certain other people, on YouTube and other platforms, but I'd like to discuss maybe an approach that we should be taking more when it comes to the likes of Farage or GB News, because I know you've done in the past, you've done response videos to GB News, and they were really interesting, and I think you really were able to present an alternative view to that. But should we be more aggressive in our approach to the likes of Farage and GB News, or should we focus more on the facts, for example? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've completely changed my approach recently. I took, I know I've mentioned this to you, Mats, but for your viewers, I took a good 7 months off from politics. I decided to stop making videos. I didn't watch a single political podcast. I didn't watch a single political video on YouTube, nothing for 7 months. I completely detoxed from politics altogether. And when I came back, it was strange. Sometimes in work, when you're just involved in work, you're heavily involved in work, and then you take a step back for a period of time and you come back and you just see it completely differently. And that's what it was like. I sort of switched on the Van Man Talks YouTube channel, opened it up, and I just saw just a cesspit of just mudslinging and look at this lefty loser here, look what he's done, and look at this right-wing fascist, look, he's been schooled here and all this sort of stuff. And I just completely changed my approach from then on. I just think that it's the attacking method never seems to work. I mean, it's interesting. You specifically said, how do we approach Farage and GB News? But I'm more talking about just people that follow Farage and follow GB News. Attacking them never seems to work. I just don't think it works. I don't think debates work. Um, Whenever you do these tactics, attacking, they just get further entrenched in their views. And I almost see it like if you're running a business and you're trying to bring on customers and you have a meeting, you're never going to go in there swinging and attacking to try and convince people of your argument, are you? You're never
No.
going to go in full, you have conversations. And I don't think that approach works. And a lot of people disagree with me. And that's what was sort of some of the first videos that I came out with when I came back from my break, when I was basically saying, I don't agree with this constantly attacking the other side. The other side of the argument is it's politics, it's dirty. We need to fight these people, which I understand. But well, the main thing that I want to ask is, what are we doing? Are we trying to actually convince people of our arguments, or are we trying to just cater to the people that already agree with us? Um, I'd be interested in your opinion on what I've just said, Max,
No, but
because
I agree with you, like to a certain extent, like, or a significant amount. I think there is a type of there is a problem with YouTube and social media, that it creates echo chambers, and people, and I think there's also an aspect of people are making money out of this. So if you get owned, for example, so this, I think, when it comes to debates, debates don't really work because the people who attend the debates are, and I'm talking about the people watching. I'm not talking so much about the people doing the debates, but the people watching are picking a team. My team is going into this debate, and I know my team is going to win. Or even if the team doesn't win, well, they did well. But very few people go into the debate with their mind open. So I think this is a big problem with the debates. And I've been watching I forget what his name is. He used to be on the BBC. I think he's British, but he's from a Muslim background. I can't remember. He's really big now. He set up his own media company. But he done a number. I don't know if you saw a number of videos he did. Hassan, yes, yeah. Hassan. So he did a lot of these debates recently, where he's debating like right wingers in with a timer and stuff like this with a stop.
Is it the one where there's about a group of 20?
Exactly. Yeah. But the thing about that is, while it looks good, I don't think it's really changed anyone's minds. The people who were on his side were cheering him on. The people on the far right, the far real literal fascists he was interviewing, some of them were destroyed, but I think the problem was the people who supported them will just move on to somebody else. So they will say, oh, well, okay, my guy was destroyed, but there's a whole menu of other right-wingers that I can support. So their mind was not changed. Maybe their support for that right-winger was changed. And I like the idea of debates. I think they can be interesting, but I think a problem is that a lot of the people who go in have their mind set that, okay, I'm going to cheer on my side, and if my side wins, that's great. If my side loses, well, we'll see you again next week. It's not really going to change any minds. I'd be more of the idea of asking people questions. So instead of, and I've fallen into this trap myself, attacking people on, in YouTube videos where, a member of the public is interviewed by GB News and sort of ridiculing these people. And, I hold my hands up. I'm guilty of some of these crimes, that I'm criticizing myself. But I think we need to sit down with people and ask them questions. Okay, why do you feel this way? Let people speak. This week, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. It was actually just today where the government had an injunction brought against them, or there was a court injunction where the Epping Hotel, the Bell Hotel in Epping, is no longer going to be used as an asylum centre or asylum accommodation. So the government lost this. The Conservatives and Reform UK are doing a victory lap. There are people celebrating this. Now, we don't know whether asylum seekers are going to go after this, but this will mean probably that a lot of these asylum hotels will have to be closed, because the councils will say, well, look, if one of these is closing, then they all have to close. And the right wing are going to be celebrating this. So how can we push back against that? This is, we have the government who are saying, well, we need to put asylum seekers somewhere. So I'm going a little bit off topic here. I want to address both of those.
Go ahead. We'll get to the hotels in a minute, but I completely agree with what you were saying about the videos, and I think that one that you specifically talked about, sorry, I've forgotten his name as well, but it's the one with the 20 Republicans, and it's just entertainment for people that agree, that are left-wing, isn't it? I mean, let's get real. I mean, whether that's a bad thing or not, I don't know. I mean, whether that is necessarily a bad thing, just to have entertainment and for people that think like we do, but it's not going to change any minds. And it's interesting what you said about having conversations, and this is the problem, because whether you like it or not, there's a large chunk of the population that think very differently, and we've got this political divide in the country, which is why I really hate the left right labels as well, because it gives no nuance. You have to pick one tribe, like you were saying, and sometimes you don't always agree with everything that the right believes, and you don't agree with everything that the left agrees with, but you have to pick a side. And this is how, I mean, I think we all know that it started with Brexit. That's when the wedge really went down, when we said, right, everyone in this country, you have to decide, you have to pick a team and you have to decide, and it's carried on since then. and there's no places for conversations. And I actually released a video today on my second channel where I kind of talked a little bit about this. There used to be, I don't know whether you've ever seen it, but about 10 years ago, there used to be a BBC program called The Big Questions. And they used to talk a lot about religion. And, this is one of the this is what's starting all these protests about asylum seekers. There's a large portion of the population that are very wary of Islam. And there used to be this program on the BBC about 10 years ago where they used to get people on. They used to get Muslim scholars, Christian leaders, atheists, everyone from every different slice of the country would come together and they just talk about, okay, Muslim population is growing in this country, Islam is growing in this country, how does that mix with British culture? And everyone would discuss. But that program, that would never happen nowadays. The BBC would stay completely clear of that because they're scared. They're scared of offending people. No one wants to talk about this subject. This is the problem. No one wants to talk about it. So what happens is when people want to talk about it, they end up going to X and
Yes.
places like that and talking about these subjects where they actually encounter real Nazis. I just think it's a real problem that we just can't have open and honest conversations anymore about this topic. And, that leads in to what's going on with the hotels that you just talked about. I mean, my biggest fear with what's happened with this is that surely it's going to spark more riots because if they've won a victory in Epping, they've got this hotel closed down from asylum seekers staying there. Isn't that just going to pop up now all over the country? And my biggest problem is with this is Starmer should have got a grip on this when he came in. I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm pretty sure that wherever you sit on the political spectrum, people think that housing asylum seekers in hotels is a bad idea,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't work.
Yeah.
These people, they're basically sort of locked up in limbo. They can't work, they can't do anything. And of course, like with any chunk of society, you're going to have your bad apples. And, we saw what happened. Apparently, a 14-year-old girl was sexually assaulted, which is what sparked this riot. Everyone knows that wherever you sit on the political spectrum, that housing asylum seekers in hotels is a bad idea. And this should have been number one for Starmer when he comes in. I mean, if he wants to win the next election and stop reform coming in, don't sort out hotels and asylum seekers because that is the biggest thing. And now what's happened, because he hasn't done anything about it, the protesters, the right have now won a victory, and now they're the victorious ones. And this should have been a victory for Starmer if he could have actually managed to sort out this situation and said, even like you can't magic a wand and have a different system, but at least if he had like a plan in place and said, look, no one agrees with housing asylum seekers in hotels. This is the plan that we've got over the next few years. We're going to phase it out. We can't do it straight away. And this is what we're going to do. And we're going to have centres here or whatever. But because he's done absolutely nothing, protests have happened. And now it's just one giant big victory for the right.
Like I'm not here to carry water for Keir Starmer, so I just want to clarify that. I'm not a huge fan, but I think he's been dealt a terrible hand of cards because the situation. So that and it's really fucking frustrating because Robert Jenrick was putting out videos about or clips on social media on X or whatever, and he was saying about, oh, look at all these hotels and the asylum seekers have been put in these hotels and they're it's a disaster and this is the Labour Party's fault or Labour government's fault. When there's a clip of, and I put it in a video today, it's probably just dropped out before we came on, but in this video, Robert Jenrick, who's been called out by Reform, is back in 2022 was talking about, oh, we're booking up all these hotels and we're moving asylum seekers into these hotels. Now, the problem at the time was the detention centres were filling up and they had no more space in them because they were not processing claims. So they decided what we'll do is we'll book up hotels because they had tried to go down the road of army bases and stuff like that. But the problem with the army bases was they had been abandoned for like 20 years. So they were not in a decent state. So it cost more to fix them up and put people in than just to put them in hotels. So the idea from the Conservatives was we'll stick them in hotels. It's cheaper because you just give them meals. We book up the accommodation and it's fine. So the Tories created this problem, and I'm not carrying water for Starmer here.
No, I agree. He should be banging the drum that this is the Tories' problem.
Yeah, and this is something I really don't understand. Labour keeps banging on about smashing the gangs, when they could. Zoe Gardner yourself. So Zoe has said on a number of occasions, if you create safe routes, this would stop the gangs. So if you create a safe way for people, this would remove. And I think this would be really important as something to take away from Farage, because Farage and Reform keep banging on about the boats. Oh, the boats. When he's there with his binoculars at Dover, looking out for boats. I don't know if you heard about Rupert Lowe was finding boats when they were not really. I don't know. Did you hear the story about Rupert Lowe?
Orders or something?
Yeah, exactly. For charity. But anyway, if you create a safe route, then the boats sort of disappear because people will just come in a safe way. Now, of course, that's not going to fix the problem with the hotels. But with the hotels, you'll need to move people into the local areas. Now, this is going to create tension as well. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. At least if you spread people out around the country, you put 3 guys in a flat at the end of a street, it's not going to attract a huge protest. But if you have 300 guys in a hotel or ex-hotel in the center of town, that's going to attract attention. It's going to attract a protest. So I think what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to spread people around the country, but this is going to be more expensive. It's cheaper just to stick people in a hotel because you have 300. Some of the rooms have like 4 or 5 guys in each room. They have their meals prepared. Everything is set. You can basically budget it pretty easily. But if you have people living in rented accommodation, the landlords will be like, okay, well, we'll jack up the rent, now that we have asylum seekers, or we'll have to add, we want money for wear and tear and all of this. So it generally becomes more expensive. And then, of course, you have to manage these people, so it's more expensive as well. So it's cheaper to keep them in hotels. But as we see, it's politically expensive. So I don't know if there's a real way around this apart from moving people. What do you think about that? Should the government move people into maybe rented accommodation or something?
Yeah, I think what you said is a good idea, but it's down to the money, isn't it? You just the expense. How much do they want to spend on this? I think with as far as we're concerned, with the threat of a Reform government coming next time around, I think it's worth paying a lot of money for this and sorting this out. And you just need those 2 things sorted. You said, you mentioned Zoe there. Everyone's crying out for just something in France where we can pick and choose, like this deal with Macron recently, 1 in, 1 out. I don't even know what that means, to be honest. I mean, it seems a bit weak, but why couldn't he have just come up with a deal where we just go to France, say, look, we will take a certain amount of numbers, we'll pick and choose, we can look at the asylum claims, look at the people that generally deserve to come over here. If you can stop the boats that way by actually bringing people over and stop the hotels, then I don't know where reform haven't got a leg to stand on when it comes to the next election. We started this conversation with how do you fight the far right. That's how they do it. That's how this Labour government does it, by sorting out those two issues, which surely can be done. I mean, it just depends how much money you want to throw at it.
I think another issue that when it comes to dealing with the far right is the media. If you look at the protests that have been taking place, GB News and Talk TV have been talking about them ad nauseum, non-stop, and I think they can say, oh, look, we have achieved this victory. So this is a huge advantage for Reform, and it's a huge advantage for the Tommy Robinsons of this world, who'll say, oh, look, we have scored a victory. So if we protest enough, we will achieve this. Now, we don't see it happening on the left. People have been protesting about what's happening in Palestine, or people have been protesting over the 2-child benefit cap and stuff like that, and it hasn't moved the government. So the right will say, well, see, when we protest, we succeed. I think a big thing that's missing there is the media. The media have been amplifying this a huge amount. So
It's not
we're
also
go
so
ahead. Yeah.
it's not also just the mainstream media that you
Yeah.
talk about. It's the army. We talked about YouTube, the army of YouTubers that get ridiculous views every single day, hundreds
Yes.
of thousands of people that are watching. Now, I understand the irony here because I am just a guy that talks about politics in my van, but the army of people out there that are just talking with a camera and fueling this, and they get ridiculous amounts of
There was
views.
there was a video there was a video or a channel I saw recently. It just popped up over the last 6 months, I think, or over the last year. It wasn't just about the protest, but it was also about other protests as well. But one of their videos had 800,000 views, and the video was 5 hours long. So it was
Wow.
some guy wandering around with a camera for 5 hours, filming protests, interviewing people, but 5 hours, 800,000 views. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have a video that has 800,000 views.
Mm. But
Um,
this is what I'm saying. This goes back to what I'm saying, that people just want to be heard. And if you don't let people be heard, they go into the depths of X and they go into the depths of YouTube because there is, well, it's not even the depths, it's the mainstream on YouTube.
yes.
That's the only place that they can go and discuss these things. I mean, an example that I always like to give is how 150,000 people viewed a video from Katie Hopkins, and it was the real truth of what's going on in Ukraine, and it was a 5 minute long video. So 150,000 people are getting their information about the truth of what's going on in Ukraine from Katie Hopkins in a 5 minute video. And this is this is exactly what the problem is. And I really don't know how you solve it. I've been fighting with this, and maybe you might have some insight, Max, but I think people need to be heard about these issues. I think we need to talk openly. Um, like I said previously about Islam, it seems to be a topic that no one wants to talk about. They're too scared to talk about it, and I think a lot of people on the left shy away from it as well. As soon as you bring it up, oh, you're just being racist. It's like, no, we can have legitimate conversations about this, and I think it's important because if you don't, like I say, people would just go to the depths of the internet and have these conversations there, where they'll turn to extremism.
I think there were conversations, but in the past, you were mentioning the BBC show, was
Mm,
it the Big Talk or something? I remember there were debates in the past on Question Time about, religion, about Islam, but yeah, but I agree that a lot of this has sort of disappeared. There was Christopher Hitchens. You're probably familiar with Christopher
yeah.
Hitchens. So he was somebody who was debating people all the time. But as you said, it feels like certain topics we can't talk about, and I'm an advocate for talking about everything. We should be able to
Mm,
talk about and debate pretty much everything, and it actually helps people. Because, like, for example, I have some friends who are from Morocco, and I learned a lot of things, not just related to Islam, but to the Moroccan culture as well, and the language and everything like that, just by interacting with them.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have our mindset, and we think, okay, this is how people are. But when you actually interact with people, and this is why I'm a huge advocate for interviewing people, talking to people I also disagree with. I've tried to do interviews with live streams, interviews with people on the right. I've reached out to a number of them. Some of them have come back. Some of them have not. And I think part of the problem is because when they become pretty big, they have something to lose if they feel that they have been owned or something. And I'm not about that. I'm not about having a debate where I win or you lose, or you win and I lose. It's about having a conversation about things, because I want to learn. I want to
Mm.
understand. There's always a chance to learn something new. And I think we only do that through conversations, and we need to be able to have a conversation. It feels like we used to be able to do this, but we can't do it now. Maybe because YouTube was
It's that
supposed to.
wedge. It's
Yeah.
that wedge that I talked about, starting with Brexit, where the country was just divided, left or right, pick a tribe. And you mentioned there about having conversations in the real world with people from different cultures, and this is the integration is the biggest problem in this country. I've said in previous videos, uh, my experience living in Brighton, and I think London is quite the same. It's very there's no one big population in Brighton, especially Brighton. It doesn't matter what your sexuality, what your gender, where you're from. There's a big melting pot of Europeans love Brighton in particular. There's loads of people, Spanish, Portugal. It's just everyone. It's just a city full of everyone, where everyone judges each other on their character. And I'm not going to try and pretend that I know what it's like to grow up in some of these towns like Rotherham, Luton, Middlesbrough, where the population is just seems to be completely divided, where you've got the British Asian population and the British white population that don't integrate. They kind of keep to their own. And again, I don't know how you solve that, but that is how you solve this problem with more integration. People need to speak to each other in the real life. We need to integrate. I think it's happening. Well, I mean, I can only base my opinions on my worldview of living where I live. It's happening here. My son, for instance, his friendship group, he's got a couple of friends from Pakistani parents. He's got an Albanian friend, a Spanish friend. They're just a big mix. And the second generation immigrants are just integrating so well. They seem to have this locked down. They don't really care the color of your skin or what your background is. They're just friends. But we need to try and do better integration in some of these towns where they just seem to be so divided. We've seen it for decades in America in towns where you just have the black population and the white population and they don't integrate. This is where the problems lie. And it's talking and having conversations in the real world where you solve these problems.
No, I agree. I agree with you, and I think integration is so important. But I always bring up on the show, not always, but when I can, I bring up the point of integration is a two-way street. So it's important that when the people arrive in a country, that they integrate, they try to integrate. But it's also important for the community to try and help them integrate. And this is what I'm really critical about people like Farage and Robert Jenrick in particular. Robert Jenrick keeps talking about people not integrating. And I would love to ask him, what have you done to help people integrate? Like something, you could help people integrate. Like your son is meeting with these kids. These kids are, I don't know how old they are, but it's irrelevant. But they're chatting. What are they probably talking about? Girls, talking about phones, talking about TikTok, talking about these things. And once they start talking about these things, they would say, "Hey, these other guys are like me." Mm. So the integration, they talk about things that are in common, and we have so many things in common. But I'm really critical of politicians. Doesn't matter where they're from, but the politicians who are talking about, well, these people need to integrate, and they're right. People need to integrate. Integration is best for the community. It's best for the individual, but also the politicians have to help people integrate. Like some years ago, there were some. I think they were from North Africa. There were guys who were moved in, not into an asylum hotel, but there were asylum seekers who were moved into onto a street where I used to live, and when there was talk about them arriving, the community, some people in the community were like, "Oh, we don't want these guys here. We don't want these guys here. We don't know who they are. What are they going to be a risk? What are they going to do?" And when they eventually arrived, it was about 4 or 5 guys. I remember a lot of people in the community said, "Hey, let's go and meet them. Let's go and have a chat with them." And people brought cake and they brought food and they didn't bring any drink wine. Some of them did, but they didn't understand, if it was a Muslim culture or whatever. But people brought stuff and had a chat with them. Their Italian wasn't very good, but those of us who spoke a little bit of English or French or whatever, we could help communicate. And within a week, a lot of the young guys were like, meeting people in the bar or in the cafe or walking around without any problems, and the community helped with the integration. And I think this is really important. Like whenever Farage or Robert Jenrick or Priti Patel or whoever is talking about these people need to integrate, I would love to ask them, what have you done to help them integrate? Because if you have done nothing, then you can't just rely on them integrating. And it is really important, because I'll just come back to you in a moment. I just wanted to put this out. I remember when what's her name? So Sarah Pochin, the Reform MP, was talking about the burqa, and I had said, when it comes to the burqa is, in my opinion, you probably agree with me, it's a symbol of oppression. The women have to wear it. And she was talking about banning it. And I don't know your opinion on this, and I'd love to hear it. But I think banning it would force these women to stay at home. I think a solution to banning the burqa would be to empower these women to be in a situation where they can stand up to their husband or whoever and say, fuck you, I'm not wearing it. I'm going out. They should be in a situation where they feel empowered to do that, because banning it means that they would not be able to leave the home and they would be stuck at home, and that is counterproductive. I understand that people don't like to see it. When I was in London last year, we don't see it very much here in Italy, but I remember in London I saw a lot of women with the burqa, and it is. I'm being honest here. When you see somebody wearing this outfit, it is, I don't want to say intimidating, but it makes you feel uncomfortable because you're not seeing someone's face. We interact by looking. This is why I have the camera on. This is why you have your camera on. We interact by looking at each other to read our expressions, read our body language, and things like this is a limit. It's a barrier, and I'm of the idea of bringing down barriers. But of course, people should only be bringing down the barriers if they feel comfortable doing that. I'd also like to, I'd like to get your opinion on that, and then I'd like to ask you about flags, but we just want to get your take on that.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you say, and this is the problem. There is a lot of fear about Islam that as it's not normal for us to see people wearing burqas down the street and stuff, and that's why so many people have this fear, and that's where it stems from. I mean, you mentioned Christopher Hitchens earlier. I mean, I definitely about 10, 15 years ago went down the atheist rabbit hole of watching all of that stuff, and I am an atheist. I'm not a massive fan of religion as a whole, but I feel that like I say, I feel that Islam can get more moderate, and I see it in the youngsters now. I keep using the example of my son, but his Muslim friends, I'm not an advocate for alcohol or whatever, but they're drinking, they're doing what kids do at that age, at 19 years old, and they like football, they like fish and chips, they like tea. They're British. They're British in every aspect. They're British, and I think the next generation will make Islam a bit more moderate. I'm not a fan of religion as a whole, but I mean, but these are the stories. This is the problem, isn't it? Because this is what all the stories that the media focuses on. They don't show the example that you just gave with the immigrants coming to your town and the community coming out to meet them. You don't get the stories of the mosques that are coming together and going out and feeding the homeless and stuff like this. Those stories get buried. All you get is the story of the asylum seeker that assaulted that young girl, and it's tragic. And this stuff happens. You can't just hide away from it. You can't hide away that there's a certain amount of people of Muslim women that are being suppressed by their husbands, and this happens. You can't just hide away from it. And there is a big difference between people that do follow their faith really strongly when it comes to the rights of women, when it comes to the rights of homosexuals. They have a lot of very different views. And that's why I keep coming back to this, but we just need to talk to each other so much more. We need to talk, and it's not being done, and it's being suppressed, and that's why it's going down into the depths of internet, where people just see all the bad things. They just see all the bad.
They end up in their echo chambers. I just wanted to read a super chat from David. Thanks so much, David. The non-integration is an England problem. They ghettoized these communities. Didn't happen here in Scotland. So I don't know if you're familiar with what's happening in Scotland, but there seems to be a better integration of asylum seekers and refugees in Scotland. I don't know if this is a political decision, or
well, it's just whether they've got a plan. This is the thing. There is no plan in place when you bring in large waves of people into the country. Like, I have issues with immigration as a whole anyway. I think the whole immigration policy is completely arse backwards in this country, because we bring in loads of high skilled workers. But yeah, if our young British kids want to do these jobs, they got to saddle themselves with 60 grand's worth of debt if they want to be a nurse or an engineer or a doctor. You know, the whole the whole immigration system is completely arse backwards. And if you're bringing large swathes of people in, you need to have a plan. And it looks like in Scotland they've got a plan. You have to be able to properly integrate. You have to have, you've got jobs and accommodation available. But we're bringing, not, well, we're not. They're coming in boats, but they're coming into a country that's broken in England, and it's not working.
There's a question here from Ivan. I'd like to put it to you as well, Marcus. How do Labour finally improve their communications and make people feel better off and improve the NHS? These are key factors for Labour's success. So, yeah, I agree. Labour need to both improve the situation for ordinary people, but they also need to communicate that they have done this. Because I've mentioned before, even if the economy is running at 10%, GDP growth is at 10%, if people don't feel it, they're not going to vote for Labour. What's your take on that, Marcus? And then I eventually will come back to flags, because I'd like to get your take on flags.
Exactly that. We need to feel it. You get these stats all the time, like GDP has gone up here or blah blah blah. I'm
fastest growing nation in the G7.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just an average guy that drives a van for a living. This stuff doesn't mean anything to me. What I need to see is my electric bill going down? Are the groceries prices going down? Can I actually feel it? Do I actually have a little bit more money in my pocket? But it's an interesting point about communication with Labour, because the good things that they have done, and they have done some, just never get communicated properly, do they? We never really hear about it.
But I think some of it is down to the media, but also I think a lot of it is down to Labour themselves. Like when it came to smash the gangs, Stormer had the lectern out. He was doing his press conference with smash the gangs. And around the same period, I think the NHS waiting list came down. And there was an article in The Guardian on page 25 or something like that about the NHS waiting list coming down. And I was like, what is wrong with them? Like, you have an opportunity here to sell a massive win. This is a massive win. You brought down the NHS. You were talking about focusing on the NHS waiting list, bringing it down. This is going to help people, get more people into work eventually, if that's your goal. Why aren't they talking about that when there's a massive opportunity? But instead, they were talking about immigration, which is important for a lot of people. But I think the cost of living and the NHS is the priority for most people.
Yeah, I think that's all they need to do to win the next election. Just people feel like, okay, these guys have come in over the last 5 years. I feel better off. NHS standards are better. I feel like I've got a bit more money in my pocket. Then people will vote them back in.
Yeah. Just I wanted to come back to, so the question I think it was very interesting. What's happening with the flags at the moment? So you see flags being put up around, I don't know if you've been following this, but there have been flags put up around England, St. George's flag, Union flags, being hung on lampposts around, normally around these asylum hotels, as a sort of protest against, I'm not sure what. Now, the question I'd have for you would be, would you feel comfortable putting up a flag outside your house? Or would you feel, well, this is a thing that the far right do? Just like either a Union flag or an English flag?
It's an interesting question, actually. I always used to, for the World Cup, I always used to put an England flag in the window, and I haven't done it for a while. You're exactly right. It has been taken over now, hasn't it? It really has been taken over. And yeah, it has different connotations. I can't help it. When I drive past and I see a pub with a St. George's flag in the window, I'm like, I know what sort of pub that is.
A Witherspoons.
I feel safer in a Wetherspoons, to be honest. But yeah, it's totally taken on that connotation. It really has, and it's sad.
And exactly, it's sad. It shouldn't be the case, because it's your flag. Yeah. It doesn't belong to the far right. It doesn't belong to Reform. It belongs to English people. It belongs to the normal English people. So how can people win it back? I've mentioned to people on social media about, for example, when it comes to the anti-racist protests, I said to people, you should turn up with the Union flag. You should
Mm.
turn up with the flag of St. George. You should say, this is our flag. Don't let the far right take control of it. Like, take back control, like the Brexit rhetoric. Take
Yeah,
back control of your flag. It's your flag. It's not their flag. It's the flag of the nation. So people should, like in Scotland, they don't have a fear of flying the flag. In Wales, people don't feel,
definitely
I
not.
don't
No.
think people should feel, oh, I better not fly it because people might think I'm a racist, or people might think I'm far right. I don't,
Mm.
is that the
Well, it's a
mentality?
very good point. It's a good point. I've never thought about that actually, but yeah, that would be fantastic if they actually brought the English flag to those protests. Instead, they probably got the Palestine flag, haven't they? It
Yeah.
was, you know,
But
uh,
which is understandable. Like if you're going to the pro-Palestine march, but
yeah,
some people should bring the English flag with them to say, look, yeah, I'm English, but I support what's happening. I support the Palestinians, or I'm English, but I'm against racism. Like, because these people are English. Some of the responses to this have been, yes, but we're anti-colonial, and I say, okay, but that's not the point. The point is, it's your flag.
mm,
And what it does is, I think it would send a bit of confusion to the other side, but they'd be like, hey, wait a minute, why are you carrying
yeah,
that flag? That's our
yeah.
flag. No, then maybe they'd realize, wait a minute, it's not our flag, it's everyone's flag. Or maybe I'm just talking crap here, I don't know.
No, no, no. I agree with everything you say, and that flag is such a shame that it's just taken on. It turns up at every single Tommy Robinson rally. That's why that's what you associate it with now, because you just see it in the news all the time at those far right rallies, and now it's just ingrained in your head now that that is the British flag, and it's a shame.
um, Would you be willing to debate? You have in the past, you have debated people on the
Yeah.
far right. I don't want to call them far right because they would not describe themselves as far right, but people who are right of center. Let's put it like that. Um, how has your approach been, and what would you say were successes and maybe failures in debating those people, or discussing things with them?
Yeah, I've done a few. I think I definitely have a different approach now. For all the reasons that we mentioned earlier about debates, that style will never change in anyone's minds. But I think really, if if you can try it, there's a difference in my mind between a debate and a conversation.
Yes.
A debate is where you come to it with your sound bites the messages that you want to get across, and you just back and forth, and it basically just turns into an argument. A conversation is where you actually listen to both sides and you talk. And I think if I was going to do it again, I think you can do it successfully. But if we're talking about having a conversation with a reform voter, for instance, um, I'd be far more interested in talking about economics rather than because we just always go down the trap of immigration and then it just turns into, well, you're racist or you're not. Blah, blah, blah. I'm far more interested in a conversation with a reform voter on economics because I think a lot of people gravitate to reform because of the immigration stuff. Maybe they do have issues with immigration or that they're a bit concerned about things, and then they have to sort of fall in line also with their economic policy, which I don't think everyone is like. This goes back to what I was saying about being stingently left and stingently right. Well, I think you can be a sort of, sometimes I consider myself left-wing economic, but I am actually conservative in some of my more sort of cultural beliefs. And I think a lot of reform voters don't necessarily agree with the economics of reform, which is what is really, really dangerous in my mind. This is one of the things that I'm most scared about if they come into government. I just think they have to fall in line because they agree with one thing, they have to agree with another. And there was a recent poll actually of reform voters. I don't know whether you saw it, that preferred Jeremy Corbyn to Keir Starmer. Did
Yes.
you see this?
Yes.
Yeah. I think the majority of that is because they probably, whatever you think of Jeremy Corbyn, he believes what he believes and he's honest about what he believes. He's not hiding anything. He's upfront with what he believes. I think that's probably
No, no,
that
I
more.
agree. Yeah, I think a lot of people like authenticity. So they like the idea that who I like Jeremy. I don't agree with Jeremy Corbyn's politics, but I like him as an individual because I know exactly what he thinks. And they hate Starmer because they don't know what he stands for.
Yeah.
And I would agree with them on that because I have no idea what Keir Starmer actually believes in because he's
Mm.
saying one thing one day and something else the next. Cavan, thank you so much for that support there. Um,
Yeah.
so when it comes to I can understand why they would like Jeremy Corbyn, but also many people don't care much about or don't know about policies. So they will say you probably remember back in 2019 people were saying I'm voting for Boris in 20 like for the election. I was like, but you're not voting for like you're in I don't know, in Manchester. You're not voting
Yeah.
for Boris. You're voting
Yeah.
for the Tories, but you're voting for the personality.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people, and Farage is going to do well with that because he has this cult of personality. But also, people are not voting on policies, unfortunately. They're voting on personalities. And as you said, the economic policies of reform are, well, like Brexit, cuts to the government, cuts to regulations that are there to protect people, protect the environment, protect workers. They voted against measures to improve the situation for workers. Andrea Jenkins today was talking about how she hates trade unions. Like, this is not somebody who's on the side of
Mm.
workers. Somebody who's on the side of workers
Yeah.
will be encouraging people to join a trade union because there's strength in numbers. But
I don't
instead,
think a lot of Reform voters really know about their economic policy.
no,
And this goes back to what I think we should be doing as
commentator.
commentators on the left is just pushing a clear, concise message about Reform's economic policy. You may be sympathetic to their immigration stuff, but do you actually understand what a Reform government would do to the NHS, to council fundings would be absolutely stripped. All these things basically turning this country into what you see in the US, just pure free market capitalism unleashed, a dog eat dog world, just the survival of the fittest. I mean, that's what I see a reform government being, and that scares the living crap out of me. And I think that should scare the living crap out of maybe some reform voters that do have problems with immigration, but don't want to see their NHS stripped, don't want to see our towns and cities turn into what we see in the US. I don't know whether you've ever seen any of these videos of Philadelphia, Kensington Avenue, and stuff. Basically, these tent cities that are
Yes.
just drug havens, just zombie land. I see that happening with a reform government. I see that happening over here. If the NHS is stripped, I mean, literally, the NHS, I think, is the only thing that's stopping our towns and cities turning into those drug zombie lands, because at least people actually have access to healthcare. You take that away, then, it's terrible. This is the message that we should be pushing. And to go back to your original question, that's if I was going to do a debate again, or not a debate, but just a conversation with a reform voter, this is what I'd be concentrating on, the economic policy, because I think that should scare a lot of people, really.
Yeah, and I don't think many of them would have a good response to what you have to. At least they're the people who would be officially with reform. If it's somebody on the sidelines, well, I'm not planning to vote for reform. I prefer, I don't know, Rupert Lowe or someone. How's it poppin'? Sent us a super chat, says, big problem with debating the average reform voter is that they get angry very easily and verbally attack you instead of making salient points.
Yeah,
Would
yeah,
you agree
yeah.
with that?
Average. Well, this is the thing. If you actually get someone on for a debate, you first reached out to me with my video on Jimmy the Giant and Constantine from Trigonometry.
Yeah.
That's the thing. The guys that actually do these debates on the right are usually the ones that stay calm. Usually the ones they are, because that's all they've got. Because if they can stay calm in the situation, um, another one that springs to mind is Jacob Rees-Mogg and Marina
Marina
Purkis.
Purkis, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly the same thing. Like, I agreed with everything Marina was saying, but Jacob Rees-Mogg was the one that stayed calm, the one that's Marina was getting quite pent up and quite angry, and she didn't mean to, but I think at times she came across quite quite arrogant, but just because she was so passionate about what she believed in. And this is the problem that you have, I think, in these situations, whenever these big time, the experts, the ones that really know how to debate on the right, always come off more calm, more collected. And for some reason, whoever's fighting the left cause always seems to get more passionate and angry. But he is right about the initial comment. If you're just talking to your average reform voter in a comment section, which is never a good
Or
place to
no,
be
no,
having a
definitely.
conversation,
Or on
it's really
Facebook.
not. Well, that, I mean, straight away, I would just say to anyone and any of your viewers, just stop doing that. Honestly, just stop debating people online. It doesn't work. It normally will entrench them even further in their views, and yeah, I'm not a fan of it.
No, it's a waste of time, and unless you have somebody in front of you with a camera, or even better, if they're sitting, if you're sitting down in a pub with somebody, you have a much better conversation.
Mm.
We have another comment from Ivan. Thank you so much, Ivan. It also needs to be exposed more than ever that reform are dangerously anti-people with disabilities, including their abhorrent views on autistic people. Yeah, I agree. Thanks so much, Ivan, for that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
100% agree with that. I mean, that's the thing that scares me about them most is that it's pure just dog eat dog, survival of the fittest. If you're poor, if you're disabled, basically, we don't care about you. That I can't see a Farage government caring about
no.
disabled people. That's is not going to happen. And also just poor people in general. Basically, it's just the attitude of, well, if you've done better at school, if you become an entrepreneur, then you'll succeed in life. Minimum wage, let's shrink that right down. It's just all that stuff that people, I think, are not really thinking about. That are looking to vote reform. They just are concerned about immigration. They see Farage, and that's the route they go.
It sort of reminds me of what's his name, Charlie Mullins, who left Britain to go to Spain because he was afraid, because he said Labour are destroying everything, and this was like 2 months before the election. So he was but now he's joined Reform UK. This is a guy who said that Brexit would be, he was a Remainer. Charlie Mullins, the Pimlico plumbers guy.
Yeah.
He was actually a Remainer, and he was against Brexit, but now he's joined Reform. So maybe he doesn't have that much of a problem with Brexit after all. Or he thinks, well, I'd be better off with Reform. Like, this has to be a thing that people have to ask themselves. Why are very rich people aligning themselves with Reform if Reform is a party of working people? It doesn't make any, like, very rich people. I just want to read another comment here. There is no arguing with fear. The right wing creates fear out of the other. There are no reasoned arguments to counter that fear. And that's from SG. Thanks, SG. Yes. Fear is a very powerful drug, as they say, and Farage and Reform are able to tap into that. Look, when it comes to the asylum hotels, as you said at the beginning, Van Man, the number of people who are involved in this is very little, but the fear factor is very high. So the number of people involved in crime from different communities is generally very small, but the politicians are able to ramp up the fear.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're experts at it, and they're
Yeah.
experts at using the media. I mean, we look at the two sides. We mentioned how piss poor Labour are at getting their message across. Reform right now, not only your GB News and your Talk TV and all those major outlets, but just the army of YouTubers, the army of people on Twitter. They're experts at this stuff. Even the other day, I don't make a habit of looking at sort of like sexy Instagram girls, but one happened to crop up on my feed. Literally, they've got like an Instagram girl, like an OnlyFans girl, uh, with a Reform t-shirt on, doing loads of reels. There was one that came up that was like, don't vote for advance. Any vote that isn't for Reform will split the vote, and it's a vote for Labour. And she's like looking all sad with big boobs, and it's like you can't make this stuff up. But they've got everything. They've got everything on that. They've got the money. They've got the media outlets. They've got an army of people following them.
And
And
and something else, they're not afraid to try these things. Like, you'd never see the Conservatives or the Labour Party doing this, because not because they disagree, but because they're afraid. And Farage and Reform are like, yeah, let's give it a go. If it works, they're not afraid to do this. Like Farage recently,
they've got nothing to lose, I guess.
They've also, nothing to lose as well. So it might piss off a few people, but it might, it grabs people's attention. They know that there's no such thing as bad publicity. Farage also this week is selling football shirts, Reform football shirts, £99 for a signed football shirt. This was a story. I don't think he expects to make a lot of money out of this. I think he's going down the road of Trump. But the attention, it reminds me of something quite positive a few years ago. I think it was Radiohead. Radiohead released one of their albums free on the internet. But what they did was they made a big hullabaloo about it. So people went to the website to download the music for free, or they said like you can pay whatever you want for the album. But on the website there was an advertisement for their next concert. So they got a huge amount of media attention around them giving away their music for free. People go there and I think Farage is understands this. The attention is more important than what you're actually selling. Yeah. So he's able to latch on to what we're going to do is we're selling t-shirts or football shirts for £100 signed one. Like, people who go, that's ridiculous, and then they'll share this information on social media, and then it gets the attention, the media attention, which Farage loves. Before I just want to get your take on that as well, but before we do that, I just want to read some other comments. Captain Coconut, thank you so much for that. Herr Fromage was seen entering a music store as he was interested in purchasing a new sympathizer for his upcoming rallies, and he was very surprised to find out that they did not sell a Nazi one. Okay, very good, thanks for that. QA Library says Reform, thanks so much QA Library as well. Reform football kit had a surprise upside down Union flag. That's quite a common problem, isn't it? Where patriots are waving their flags, but it turns out to be upside down. And then Political X. Hey, so Alex is here. Thank you so much, Alex, for this as well. Fear cannot be defeated, but only with truth. Sorry, fear can be defeated. I ruined that. Fear can be defeated, but only with truth. And do check out Political X's book on the issue of fear. What's your take on? I've forgotten the question I wanted to ask you. I don't know.
Well, I mean, Alex's last point there is exactly sums up what we've just been talking about, isn't it? I mean, that's the route that we need to go, and that's what I've been trying to say is don't get down and dirty with these guys. I don't think it does anything. I don't think it helps to try and do what they're doing and attack them the way we just have truth on our side and facts, and just push home the simple message of the facts of what a reform government would be. The overriding topic of this video is that, I guess, and what I believe. I don't know if I'm right, but this is what I believe. I think that we should just be pushing that fact that a reform government would be absolutely awful on the economy, and just having the facts on our side and not attacking, because I don't think it does anything.
No, but I agree. And conversations are the way to go. Sitting down with people, family, friends, people who are maybe considering voting for reform, having a conversation with them about asking them questions. I think the Socratic method, just keep asking people questions like, what do you think Farage would do when in power? What do you think? What are some of his policies? If they don't know the policies, maybe you take out your phone and say, let's have a look at the policies together. We can discuss whether they're good policies or not. How would they afford these things? What is their plan for the NHS? Are you worried about the NHS under reform? So I think some of these questions would get people thinking. We may not convince people to vote the other way, but I think, unfortunately, a lot of this falls on the Labour government. The Labour Party, the Labour government need to improve the situation for people and sell it as a victory. Say, look, you need to stick with us, and convince people to avoid Farage. Because I think us on the outside, while we can try different techniques, I think a lot of it comes down to the incumbent government. We saw it with Joe Biden. The economy was doing better under Joe Biden than it was under Trump, but people just didn't feel it. So they were like, yeah, I'll vote for the convicted felon. I'll vote for the sex pest. And I think a lot of people will consider voting for Farage because they're not happy with what Labour is doing. We're almost finished, so I just want to leave the last word to yourself, Marcus, if you want to say something about what we've discussed tonight before we go.
Yeah, I mean, I think I summed it up perfectly with my last comment, actually.
Okay.
But what you just said is right there. I mean, we can do what we can, but really it's up to this government. We've got to put so much trust in this Labour government to do those key things that we talked about. Just make it feel like the country is better. We need to feel it in the next 4 years. We need to feel like we've got a little bit of extra money, that life is slightly better, the NHS is slightly better. And they have to get rid of these hotels, and they have to do something about the boats. Otherwise, I mean, you do that and you kill Farage. He has nothing. You take away boat crossings and asylum hotels.
Yes, politically,
yeah,
yes.
he has nothing. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. He has nothing.
Yes.
So,
Before we go, we have one message from Christy. Thank you so much, Christy. Anne Whitcomb is a Reform Limited shirt. Sorry, in a Reform Limited shirt is pretty scary. Marcus, you'll be googling that right after the live stream.
is that image actually out there? Is it generally out there?
I hope
God.
not. So
Someone
thanks so
can
much.
send it
Thanks so much, everyone, for coming on. I hope you enjoyed this this conversation I had with Van Man Talks. If you're not following Van Man, do check him out on YouTube. We don't agree on everything, but I think that's important that we are able to have a conversation like we had tonight. So thanks so much, Van Man, for coming on. I'll see everyone else on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. And good night. Thanks so much, Marcus.
Thanks for having me on, bud.